Hi Year 11 and welcome to English in 10. Today we're going to be talking about the very often forgotten character of the prince from Romeo and Juliet. And my question for you today is, how effective is the prince in Romeo and Juliet? Before we start looking at the language used to describe and the language he uses, let's have a quick little reminder about who he is and what role he actually plays in the play. So who is the prince? Well, he is kin to Mercutio and Paris, which is quite an unusual decision made there by Shakespeare in making him related to two other quite key characters in the play who are very different to one another, but actually have got a lot of impact on the narrative as a whole. Of course, Mercutio's own death and involvement in fighting with Tybalt, and Paris for very much being a bit of a catalyst in forcing Juliet to make a very sort of quick decision on how to escape her marriage to him. He's also the political power. I'm saying he's quite a weak political power, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment why, in Verona. He is the voice of authority, but again, I do question how much authority he really does have over the monarchies and Capulets, because they have continually fought and caused a lot of brawls in his streets. The feud itself does end with really no interference from him. He actually doesn't manage to bring peace to his city. The peace comes from other people's involvement, not his own. Now, he appears 3 times in the play where he actually administers judgment every single time. So we call him the prince, but he's far more like a judge, far more like someone of authority from a criminal background, which is why in the film that you've possibly watched with Leonardo DiCaprio, you see him being presented as a police chief, and that's very much more in keeping with what he is rather than a prince like you see with like Prince William or Prince Harry, for example. Well, here's my first example for you in terms of answering or engaging with the question is this. If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives pay the forfeit of the peace. This is the first time we see him, and of course his reaction to the brawl between Benvolio and Tybalt. And here's where I sort of see him as being the director, where he's very much trying to control and organise what's happening. He tells the men, if you ever have any more arguments or fights, that's it, execution. And I'm calling him weak because initially you might think this very much portrays a very strong, powerful leader. I don't think it does actually, because he says, this is the 3rd time you've caused bloodshed in the streets. Well, hang on, 3 times, and this is the first time you're actually seeking action. That tells me that he's a man who has very much ignored the Montague and Capulets' behaviour, and now suddenly is reacting in a very over-the-top, extreme manner. He sort of goes from 0 to 100 very, very quickly, and that to me does not suggest a strong leader. Maybe he's being very reactive rather than perhaps trying to control, organise and lead. Now, he does want to keep the peace, but he doesn't actually punish them right now. I mean, he could have said to the men, right, do you know what, I'm going to punish you right now. I'm going to give you a curfew. I'm going to fine your family. He could have done some sort of punishment there of Benvolio and Tybalt, but chooses not to. He just says, if you do it again, then I'll punish you. You kind of wonder, how much will he keep his word? And of course, later on, he doesn't really keep his word, because later on, when he could have executed Romeo, he chose not to. So he's not a man whose word really is something that we can perhaps rely on. And that's maybe why, when we next see Tybalt at the Capulet party, his reaction to have a fight with Romeo is so strong, because possibly he doesn't believe what the prince will say. So as a leader, maybe they just don't really trust him or have much belief in him. Okay, and the next time we sort of see him again is, of course, after Romeo's killing of Tybalt and, of course, the killing of Mercutio, his kin. And he says this, we do exile him being Romeo. Now, it's interesting because first of all, he talks about himself as we. Like, this is what we might call this the royal we, where he calls himself we, as if we are the society, we are the community. So it's kind of interesting. He doesn't say, I do this. He's not sort of really taking responsibility in the same way as saying, I'm going to exile him. He says, we do this, meaning we, the power, we, the sort of the government or the leadership. Also, very much changing his own rules. He's sort of making up as he goes along a little bit here. Very inconsistent. One point is, I'm going to execute you if you do one more thing. No, I won't. I'm actually going to just exile you. And on one hand, I kind of sympathise and I do empathise with his reaction because, of course, Tybalt had killed Mercutio, so Tybalt was due to be executed. Romeo took the law in his own hands and did what was going to happen. So Tybalt's death was always going to happen. Also, Mercutio is the prince's kin. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know how close they were, because you don't really hear either Mercutio or Paris even mentioning each other or the prince, so I don't know how really closely related they were, but still, it was his kin. He possibly had that emotional reaction too. And you kind of wonder here, he's very conflicted between being the man of punishment, the man of order, and actually trying to sort of take on board, well, hang on, do I need to actually show mercy here? And he does show mercy, and I think that's why I call him the observer. He's trying to really look at the situation and try and make a good decision. I think he's not trying to be a bad leader, but once again, it doesn't really show someone who's got a really strong character here. My last comment for you is this. He's unable to control the passions of love and hate, not his own passions. I don't think he's like desperately devastated by Mercutio's death, and so therefore he's being very passionate. It's more that he can't control the passions around him. He can't control the monsters. He cannot control the Capulets at all. And the sort of recurring theme of love and hate throughout the entire play, he has no control over it at all. It is beyond his control as a leader. So remember, the question today is about how effective he is. This once again really undermines him because he can't control it. He can't control Tybalt. He can't control Mercutio. He can't control Romeo. And that's very evident from the fact that he then says, oh, we'll exile him, because he realises there's nothing more he can possibly do here. Okay, the third one for you is this. I'm calling him the judge. And this is the very last long speech that we hear from him right at the end of the play, when he says, all are punished. Fantastic line. But also, there's, I sort of look at it with a bit of a smile on my face, because you sort of think, punished, but not by you. You have done nothing at all. And you sort of wonder, hang on a moment, you're criticising the Montagues, you're criticising the captain. He does. His whole speech is very critical to them as parents. You've been terrible people. You've been awful. Your children have killed themselves because of you. And he judges them. And I don't mean as in he is the judge sitting in a courtroom, but rather is a real sense of he does judge them. He's very much like, this is totally your fault. And in a way, he's right. It is their fault. But in another way, you might argue, well, hang on, had you been a more effective leader, had you been a man who had much better control over your streets and the people, possibly this wouldn't have happened, maybe. So you could hold him responsible himself there, but he's actually saying, you're all punished. And obviously, and the fact that he says, all are punished, meaning there's going to be no more investigation or like that, also makes you kind of think, well, hang on a moment, surely Friar Lawrence needs to be investigated. Surely the nurse and their sort of role in this. But he said, no, closing the door on this one. And I sort of think, even at the end, you don't really see that sense of him actually, will he be at a better control of Verona? I don't know. If there's another behaviour similar to this, will he actually have any kind of role in actually leading and having restoring order? Maybe, maybe not. In terms of this line here, it does link to Mercutio's plague on both your houses. And he's saying, you've got the plague put in place by Mercutio's lines, and here you've got his kin, the prince, saying, all are punished. Like the plague has come full circle, and we know that everyone has been sort of harmed by what's happened, himself included. He has lost his kins, but his kin, both Paris and Mercutio. So he himself has lost quite a lot as well. So we've got the two children, his two members of his family too. So your question, how effective is the prince in Romeo and Juliet? So I'd like to think about his impact as a leader and a ruler on both the narrative, the storyline, and the characters. Now, with that in mind, I'm thinking, for me, when you see Tybalt at the Capulet party, I feel a real sense of that he has no respect for the prince at all. And the prince's statement of, I'm going to have you executed if you do anything, Tybalt clearly is not impacted by that. He clearly doesn't care. He clearly is not like, oh my goodness, I'm really scared of that. So he's not even actually intimidating or has any gain of respect from his people. And you think that conversation with Tybalt was actually earlier that day. Tybalt has just been told, if you do anything, I'm going to kill you. And he doesn't care at all. Think about why he reacts to specific situations. Why does he go in so hard at the beginning and say, right, anything more, I'm going to have you killed? He's jumped to a very extreme punishment there that he doesn't then really keep to at all. When he can execute Romeo, he doesn't. He just has him banished. And why do you think he's so inconsistent? Why does he not stick with what he says? He could have easily had Romeo executed and gone, I said if you did it, you do it. Why does he not? Why does he show that weakness at that point there? And finally, what do you think might motivate him as a ruler? What do you think is his actual aim? He says he wants to have peace. But what do you think is perhaps his aim as well, possibly as a leader? So how effective is the prince in Romeo and Juliet? You've got 30 minutes of writing. Over to you. Best of luck.